In the next scene, Mr. Smith offered money to Madam Cole, which she denied, telling him to keep the money for his own bakery. After reaching home, Duke doesn't like the thought that Nicola is treated so poorly after her husband's passing. When Max visits Kendall, she tells him that her grandfather wants to sponsor him, which doesn't make Max too happy. He wants to spill the beans to Kendall that Nicola, who is his friend Jeremy's wife, is actually living with him with her child, but he couldn't say a word. When Max gets home, Ken is waiting for him, ready to blow a fuse, but the truth is, he was waiting for JoJo because he secretly likes her, and she hasn't come back yet. Meanwhile, JoJo is off camping with President Jones, who suddenly has back pain and drops the bombshell that they won't be able to go home. JoJo is totally freaked out by this, as her parents will not like this idea. President Jones's daughters-in-law were waiting for him, but the next morning they start suspecting he is having an affair with some girl. They share this juicy gossip with Duke and Kendall because they are worried he might give away half of his property to this mystery woman. Duke is just happy that his grandpa has found some joy in life. Just then, Nicola shows up and Kendall starts cursing at her, which Duke really doesn't appreciate. After Duke steps outside, Nicola apologizes to him for the last night, though she barely remembers anything because she was drunk. Duke fills her in, saying she was causing chaos at the art gallery yesterday and had beaten some of the employees. Nicola is horrified when she hears this, but cheers up when Duke hands her a hangover remedy. It seems Duke is starting to warm up to her too. At the gallery, Nicola apologizes to the staff, but no one responds. She heads back to the reception and asks Miss O about the Singapore art exhibition invite, but the receptionist is clueless about this. When JoJo gets home, Ken yells at her and is clearly jealous, but she just tells him to mind his own business and leaves. Meanwhile, President Jones's daughters-in-law confront him about disappearing last night, but he doesn't give them any answers and even gets mad at them. When they press harder, he finally admits he was with his new girlfriend and in love with her. This news leaves them totally speechless. On the other side of things, Mr. Smith's business is booming, making his Madam Cole very happy. Back at the office, Kendall tries to get President Jones to sign the sponsorship form, but he refuses. However, when Kendall slyly suggests she will support his late-in-life romance, he immediately agrees. Meanwhile, Mr. Smith and his Madam Cole are preparing for her father's death anniversary. As President Jones leaves the office, the two daughters-in-law start tailing President Jones, determined to uncover his love life. President Jones goes to Madam Cole's house, bringing flowers for her father's death anniversary. But Madam Cole, holding on to a grudge, accuses him of being the reason her father died and dismisses his sympathy as fake. Watching from afar, the daughters-in-law jump to the conclusion that Madam Cole is the mysterious girlfriend. When President Jones enters the house, their minds run wild with all sorts of ideas. Inside the house, Madam Cole, Mr. Dan, all start beating up President Jones. Seeing President Jones at her place, JoJo hides because she thinks her family has found out about him. As soon as President Jones leaves Madam Cole's house, his daughters-in-law show up and threaten Madam Cole to back off from their father-in-law or face the consequences. Madam Cole is now convinced they are just as crazy as their father-in-law and starts throwing salt at them, thinking that's how you get rid of witches. In all this chaos, Ken heads home and freaks out when he spots President Jones's daughters-in-law, worried they might be there because of him. In the next scene, Duke shows up at the art gallery and gives his staff an extremely expensive painting. He casually mentions that Nicola knows Jackson personally, and after her request, he has given his most important painting to our art gallery, which leaves everyone stunned. Duke did this because he wanted to improve Nicola's image, which stopped staff from bullying her. Nicola thanks him for the favor in response. Duke asks for a ramen party, to which Nicola happily agrees. Meanwhile, Kendall brings Max to a hotel and tells him to stay there since she has already told her grandfather to sign the sponsorship papers. But Max refuses to leave his cherry blossoms, which makes Kendall furious. During the ramen party, Nicola compliments Duke, saying he is incredibly kind and handsome, which is why all the girls at the hotel are head over heels for him. Duke playfully asks Nicola if she also has a crush on him. Nicola responds that she is not a girl anymore. She has become a mom now, and she will plan to always stay single. This crushes Duke because he has started liking her. Later, when Duke and Nicola step outside, they run into Kendall and Max. Confirming that Nicola is living with Max, Kendall slaps him and gets furious. Nicola tries to clear up the misunderstanding, but Duke pulls her away. He returns to eavesdrop on Kendall and Max's argument, but can't hear much. Kendall worries that Nicola might know they were both there when the fire broke out, but Max denies it, saying he only cares about Nicola because he feels sorry for her and her child. Kendall, however, doesn't listen to him and storms off, leaving him on the spot. Meanwhile, at Madam Cole's father's death anniversary, she tells her entire family that President Jones's daughters-in-law came by, mistaking her for his girlfriend. The The family's reaction, especially JoJo's, was priceless. Later, when President Jones hears that their daughters-in-law were beaten up by Madame Cole, he facepalms and tells them that Madame Cole is like a big sister to him. He warns them again to stay out of his love life. After he leaves, the two women badmouth their father-in-law that they never dated anyone after their husbands passed away, and this old man is acting like he is in his prime. JoJo then returns all the money to Ken that she borrowed from him because she sold the diamond necklace President Jones gave her and bought a fake one instead. Ken tells her she has become quite cunning. Mr. Smith's bakery business is booming, but the police show up and give him a notice, saying that if he doesn't remove his stall from the road, he will be fined. This makes him very upset. Martha confronts Nicola, asking why she lied about Jackson giving her the painting because Jackson is her friend, and he claimed he didn't know any Nicola. So Nicola spills the truth that Director Duke made it up. Martha is shocked and punishes Nicola by making her clean the windows. Martha then confronts Duke, who explains that he hates how everyone bullies poor Nicola for no reason, and he wants to support her as a single mother. Martha starts to worry that Duke might actually like Nicola. When Duke sees Nicola cleaning windows, he feels terrible and tells her to stop. But Nicola insists she has to do it, or Martha will get even angrier. She even asks if Martha scolded Duke too much, which makes him happy because no one has ever cared so much about him before. He gives her gloves so she won't get cold, and this touches Nicola. While cleaning, a delivery arrives for Martha. Nicola hands it over to Martha's secretary, who, needing to rush to the bathroom, asks Nicola to place the parcel in Martha's office. While doing so, Nicola finds a drawer open and starts looking for an invitation from Singapore meant for her husband but doesn't find it. However, a button from her coat falls into the drawer. On the other hand, President Jones takes JoJo shopping. Seeing the price tags, JoJo starts thinking about how much money she could make by selling all the clothes. She tries them on and steps out, while President Jones tells the store owner not to say anything if either of his daughters-in-law shows up. Just then, his eldest daughter-in-law, Kathy, arrives. President Jones hides, but JoJo stands her ground, leading to a heated argument between them about their status. After Kathy leaves, President Jones comes out, and JoJo scolds him for not coming to her rescue when his daughter-in-law was bad-mouthing her. She then storms off, angry at him. Meanwhile, Duke, driving home, sees Nicola carrying her baby and feels bad for her. Back at home, Mr. Smith is busy making tons of cakes and pastries for Christmas, but Mrs. Smith reminds him that the police told him not to do that. Mr. Smith responds that they will just set up their stall somewhere else, and both of them are pleased with the idea. JoJo is still upset that President Jones left her in front of his daughter-in-law. When President Jones calls, JoJo tells him that if being with her is such an insult, he should not have gotten into a relationship with her in the first place. To reassure her, President Jones says he will introduce her to his family, making JoJo super excited. The next day, Martha is daydreaming while looking at Ken's photo when Kathy comes in, telling her that their father-in-law is calling everyone to the hall for an important announcement. The president announces that his girlfriend is visiting tomorrow and demands the entire house be sparkling clean. Everything should be and everything should look perfect when she comes. He also warns his two daughters-in-law not to say a word to her, as he knows they always manage to mess things up. Everyone in the room is shocked. The next day, when the president's girlfriend arrives at the house, she is already daydreaming about becoming the lady of the manor. As soon as she steps inside, everyone greets her warmly, but the moment they see her face, they are floored. Turns out, she is the same woman who had a huge fight with the president's daughters-in-law during the Miss Korea contest. After the president confirms it, the daughters-in-law are ready to bang their heads against the wall. At dinner, everyone is stunned by the president and his girlfriend's lovey-dovey behavior. As soon as the daughters-in-law get a chance, they try to scare JoJo off, even telling her to leave the house. But the girlfriend, eyeing the luxurious home, refuses to budge. In a fit of anger, one daughter-in-law tries to slap her, but the president swoops in like a hero, saves his girlfriend, and gives the daughters-in-law a good scolding. He even threatens to kick them out of the house if they don't stop their scheming ways. After JoJo leaves the house, Max shows up, and the two exchange surprised looks. JoJo, fearing her secrets might spill out, quickly tells Max not to mention anything to anyone in Cherry Blossom. Max agrees. When Kendall comes out, Max presents her with an expensive ring, which he bought with his own money. She is thrilled, but immediately refuses to accept it, telling Max that she won't take anything from him until he leaves Cherry Blossom. After much persuasion, she finally asks for some time to think it over. Meanwhile, at the J-Star Hotel, Santa is playing a game where he gives people the items they have drawn from the box as Christmas gifts. This gives Duke an idea, and he quickly writes the same item on all the slips, a baby stroller. He then calls Nicola and tells her to come quickly, bringing the baby with her. When Nicola arrives at the hotel, Santa asks her to draw a slip. She draws one, and as per Duke's plan, it reads, baby stroller. Overjoyed, Nicola can't believe her luck, as she had been saving up for one for ages but never managed to buy it. When Duke arrives, she excitedly shows him the new stroller. Duke pretends to be shocked, but of course, this was all part of his plan. Nicola then places the baby in the stroller and takes him out for a walk with Duke. As they chat, Duke casually asks Nicola about Jojo, but Nicola clams up, as she was warned by Jojo that she won't tell about her at the hotel and not to discuss her with anyone. They then head to a restaurant, where Nicola remarks that Duke is so good with kids, he should get married because he would make a great father. Duke, who likes Nicola, feels a pang of disappointment, hearing her suggest he marry someone else. He tries to change the subject, but just then a photographer asks to take a family photo. Nicola initially refuses, saying they are not really a family, but Duke insists, saying it's the baby's first Christmas, so they should have a keepsake. They end up taking a sweet family photo together. Duke then drops Nicola off at Cherry Blossom. Just as they arrive, Max shows up with another baby stroller. Nicola is thrilled, thinking Max is so thoughtful, but she tells him she has already won a stroller as a Christmas gift. Max then offers to get her something else instead, leaving Duke feeling incredibly jealous as Max continues to try to become the self-proclaimed father of Nicola's baby. Watching the two walk into the house together, Duke feels even worse. That night, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is selling cakes that are flying off the shelves, with everyone praising how delicious they are. Suddenly, two bakery owners show up, demanding they take down their stall because it's stealing all their business. When Mrs. Smith refuses, the two women throw all her cakes on the ground and start beating up her husband. This sends Mrs. Smith into a towering rage, and she gives them both a sound thrashing. Despite the loss, the couple stays positive and cuts one of the ruined cakes to celebrate Christmas. The next day, President Jones wishes Duke good luck for his North Sky project, as it means Duke will have to go to America. But Kendall is not pleased and tells the president that if Duke fails, she will take over the project herself. The president agrees. As Duke gets ready to leave for his trip, Nicola shows up, and Duke tells her he is going to America. Nicola starts crying because her husband Jeremy left on a business trip and never returned. She pleads with Duke not to go, but Duke promises her he will definitely come back. As Duke is flying, a flight attendant sees a photo of Duke, Nicola, and her baby, and comments that the baby looks just like Duke, which makes him very happy. Meanwhile, back at the office, Martha finds Nicola's button in a drawer and goes ballistic. After checking the security cameras, she's certain of Nicola's guilt. She calls Nicola to the office, slaps her hard, and curses her, demanding to know how a low-class girl like her dared to steal from her office. Nicola calmly replies that she was not there to steal, but to check out the Singapore art exhibition invitation, the same one her husband received. Martha calms down a bit, but then gets even angrier, saying she knows nothing about that, and warns Nicola that if she ever tries to enter her office again, she will have her thrown out of the company. Nicola feels terrible after leaving Martha's office, but is determined to uncover the truth about her husband's death, no matter what it takes. Meanwhile, Duke is secretly thrilled, thinking that Nicola trying to stop him from leaving means she really cares about him. Kathy warns Nicola to be more careful next time, because she might not be able to save her again. Nicola agrees to her. Meanwhile, Madam Cole is shocked when she spots Mr. Dan with a woman in a cafe. She confronts him, thinking if he has a family, why is he living in her guest house? Turns out the woman is his daughter-in-law. Back at the guest house, Madam Cole tells Mr. Dan to leave, but he says that while he has everything in his family, without Madam Cole, it all feels incomplete, so he won't go home. On another front, Mr. Smith's cousin comes to him and says he is leaving Seoul and wants to sell his bakery to Mr. Smith. They are overjoyed but realize they will need a loan, and without a house, they won't be able to access government loans. Mr. Smith suggests taking a private loan, which makes Mrs. Smith furious because the last time they did that, they ended up having to sell their house. Mrs. Smith tells Mr. Smith if he goes for a private loan, she will divorce him. Martha's secretary tells her that Jackson's painting sold for a hefty sum, which gives Martha the idea to teach Nicola a lesson. She puts Nicola in charge of delivering the painting, so off Nicola goes. Meanwhile, as soon as Martha leaves the office, Ken shows up, takes her on a bike ride, and they have a blast. Elsewhere, Kathy calls Jojo to meet at a cafe and she agrees. Max, all dressed up, goes for an interview with President Jones. Impressed by his sharpness, President Jones signs off on the papers and sends him off for some high-level training. Back at the office, Kendall is so happy for Max that she even accepts his ring. As for Martha and Ken, they are enjoying their fun date when Ken suddenly proposes to her. He says it's just how he feels, and Martha can reject him if she wants, but her expression says otherwise. They end up at a cafe where they spot Kathy, so they hide. Seizing the moment, Ken tries to kiss Martha, but she pulls back. In another twist, Jojo arrives at the same cafe and seeing Ken says she is there to meet her boyfriend's two daughters-in-law. Ken starts to wonder if she is talking about Martha and Kathy. To confirm, he secretly follows JoJo into the cafe and overhears her chatting with President Jones's daughters-in-law, and he is stunned to see her with them. The daughters-in-law insult JoJo and even offer her money to leave President Jones, but JoJo refuses because she knows the money she will get after marrying him will be way more. This enrages the daughters-in-law, and they threaten to have her beaten up by thugs if she doesn't back off. Just then, JoJo gets a video call from President Jones, and the daughters-in-law freak out and run away, hiding their faces. Meanwhile, Nicola is on the road when a car cuts her off. As she steps out to inspect, a biker arrives and swipes the painting from Nicola's car because he already had the key. Nicola takes a picture of the car and heads off to deliver the painting. But when she arrives at the house and checks the car, the painting is gone. She is in shock and calls Kathy, who panics too, and the whole household finds out. Nicola is terrified when she goes to President Jones's house because Duke is not there to back her up. President Jones scolds her, accusing her of ruining the company's reputation just like her husband did, and fires her. Kendall can't believe the painting just disappeared, but Nicola swears she is telling the truth. Martha accuses Nicola of stealing the painting and putting on a show, which devastates Nicola, and she ends up crying outside President Jones's house. Meanwhile, as soon as Duke arrives in America, he calls Nicola. She tries to hold back her tears, but Duke senses something is wrong and pushes her to tell him everything. And she breaks down but doesn't tell him anything because she doesn't want to ruin his business trip, and she cuts the call. Nicola had quit President Jones's company and was now earning a living by washing cars. Meanwhile, Duke gave an excellent presentation, and the project was a success. But he was worried sick because Nicola had not answered his calls since that day, and he had no idea what was going on with her. Max and Kendall were happily spending time together when Kendall's mother, Kathy, caught them together and dragged her away by the arm. At the guest house, Ken tried to talk some sense into JoJo, telling her that she was blinded by greed and falling for an old man who might not even be around tomorrow. But JoJo ignored him and continued with her work. Duke kept calling and messaging Nicola, telling her he was coming back tomorrow, but Nicola did not respond. She was also regretting breaking down in front of Duke that day. Nicola went to the police station with the picture of that car which she took on the day the painting went missing, suspecting it was involved in stealing her painting. But the police informed her that the car was stolen, which left her completely stunned. Now she had no idea how to find the painting. Meanwhile, Kathy arrived home and saw President Jones and his girlfriend cooking together, which made her blood boil. She noticed that they were making ramen, a dish President Jones despises, but he was acting like it was his favorite just because his girlfriend liked it. As soon as President Jones left the kitchen to take a call, Kathy grabbed JoJo by the collar again, telling her that if she didn't leave her father-in-law, she would make her life hell. But JoJo wouldn't give up that easily. But when President Jones showed up, Kathy backed off. Duke finally returned and went straight to J-Star Hotel, where President Jones praised him for securing the deal with North Sky Hotel. Duke mentioned that the hotel's owner, Andy, would be coming to Korea next week to sign the final deal. President Jones informed him that Andy only manages the hotel, and no one knows the real owner, who has never appeared in the media. Outside, Duke asked his Aunt Kathy about Nicola, and she revealed the whole truth to him, leaving Duke in shock. He immediately went to his mother, Martha, who was thrilled to see him and congratulated him, but Duke only wanted to talk about Nicola. He confronted his mother, accusing her of orchestrating everything because she hated Nicola and wanted her out of the company. But Martha denied it, saying Duke was blaming her for some low-class woman. Duke declared that he would find out what happened with the painting and wouldn't spare whoever was responsible, taunting his mother by saying she had nothing to worry about since she supposedly had nothing to do with it. Then he stormed out, determined to get Nicola back into the company. Martha was left feeling extremely frustrated. Outside, Duke called Nicola, asking why she had not told him anything after everything that had happened. But Nicola coldly replied that there was nothing left to say and asked him not to disturb her anymore, as she was busy washing cars now. Duke felt terrible imagining Nicola washing cars in the freezing cold. After hanging up, he met with Max and got Nicola's workplace address from him. Meanwhile, Kathy called Max and told him that she knew he was only with Kendall for money, but Max insisted that he truly loved Kendall and only accepted the sponsorship because Kendall insisted. He promised to prove himself worthy of Kendall, but Kathy told him to stay away from her daughter, leaving Max shocked by her harsh behavior. Nicola was guiding cars into the parking lot when she spotted Duke's car and was taken aback. Duke got out, furious, and tried to take Nicola with him, but she refused. Duke yelled that so much had happened, and Nicola had not told him anything, and then he told her to leave with him again. But Nicola firmly refused, saying this was her workplace and Duke should not disturb her because she needed to work hard to buy things for her baby. Duke offered to buy everything she needed, but Nicola was hurt by that and asked why he was so concerned about her, telling him she did not need his help and was not a beggar, and Duke should stop bothering her. She could earn money and take care of her baby herself. With that, Nicola walked away. Duke tried to explain that he didn't mean it that way, but it was too late. Now Martha was so hurt by Duke's behavior as she has done so much for him, but in response, he is just cursing her for that low-class girl. In her drunken state, she called Ken to meet her at the bar, to which he happily agreed to go to her. On the other hand, Madam Cole and Mr. Dan told JoJo to take care of Nicola's baby because no one is at home. She agreed to babysit him. On the road, Mr. Dan and Madam Cole encounter President Jones, who has shown up unannounced to meet her girlfriend's parents. However, Mr. Dan grabs the president by the collar and accuses him of being responsible for the mess they are in, insisting that it all stemmed from a disaster 50 years ago. When pressed about the details by Madam Cole, Mr. Dan skillfully dodges the question, with the President Jones also heading his way because he's too busy to deal with them because he is on his way to meet his girlfriend. Meanwhile, the president is wandering through the streets trying to locate the address of his girlfriend, but he has no luck finding it. He even attempts to call her, but JoJo is too preoccupied with Nicola's baby to pick up the phone. As the president continues his search, he eventually arrives at the cherry blossom. Just as he does, the lady in question happens to step outside, and they both freeze, shocked to see each other, upon realizing that now her secret is revealed in front of the president. JoJo reveals that she actually lives in Cherry Blossom. The president is taken aback. At the same time, Kathy is watching her daughter Kendall cry, and when she asks why, she doesn't give her a straight answer. Instead, she hears gossip at the office that her grandfather is planning to hand over all his property to Duke for management. Alarmed, Kathy starts yelling that all of this could slip through her fingers because of her love life. However, her mother reassures her that there is still a chance, so she should not worry just yet. On another front, while cleaning a car, Nicola accidentally scratches a customer's vehicle. The customer gets furious and starts yelling at her, but her old-looking boss steps in to save the day. After the customer went, he explained to Nicola that he and his wife are heading to a memorial for his father, so they can't help Nicola fix the damage right now. He tells her she will have to sort it out herself, and Nicola agrees, taking full responsibility for the accident since it was her fault. At a restaurant during dinner, Madam Cole repeatedly asks Mr. Dan about what happened 50 years ago. Lost in nostalgia, he recounts how he was head over heels for Madam Cole from the very beginning and would write her love letters daily. But those letters never reached her because the president or Wong, in a fit of jealousy, always managed to intercept them. Then one day, Mr. Dan receives a letter from Madam Cole saying she is getting married to a guy her parents approve of, asking him to stop writing. Mr. Dan shows the letter to Madam Cole, but she insists she never wrote it. He said he felt betrayed and confused the same way, wondering how he could have missed something so significant. As the story unfolds, Mr. Dan learns that the man Madam Cole is supposed to marry is none other than the president himself, who is described as handsome while Mr. Dan feels he is unattractive and overweight. This revelation devastates Mr. Dan, and he rushes to the city, only to discover that by the time he connects the dots, it's far too late. He is already married with children. Frustrated, he vows to get his revenge on the president. Meanwhile, Duke is having a meltdown over Nicola's harsh words, feeling overwhelmed. Unable to take it anymore, he approaches her while she's working late. Just then, a bucket of cold water spills all over her, courtesy of a car wash mishap. Duke rushes in to help, and when Nicola sees him, she is taken aback and questions his presence. Duke declares he cannot hold back any longer and is ready to step up as Nicola's partner, promising to take care of her and her baby. This bombshell leaves Nicola speechless and wondering if he has been drinking, unable to comprehend why an affluent man like Duke would want to marry a poor widow with a child. In disbelief, she urges him to leave, clearly shaken by the declaration. Duke told her that she also likes him, and if so, why would she cry on the phone that day? Nicola responds that she was very sad that day, and she feels nothing for him, so he should stop imagining things in his head. Duke, feeling crushed, takes his leave, while the president, seeing the baby in JoJo's arms, mistakenly assumes it's hers, but she quickly corrects him, saying she is just babysitting. The president urges her to leave the cherry blossom, but Nicola insists she has lived there for 20 years and has no plans to move out. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Madam Cole is not Nicola's real mother, which adds another twist to the tale. At the president's house, when the housekeeper is cleaning, she finds a photo of Ken in Martha's room, which Kathy also sees and suddenly gets a brilliant idea to ensure her share of the property. At a bar, in a drunken stupor, Martha rambles to Ken about how lonely she feels before passing out. On the way home from the car wash, Nicola still cannot wrap her head around Duke's confession. Once home, she discusses it with JoJo, wondering if it's normal to break down in front of someone you care about. In response, JoJo suggests it means you like that person, which leaves her in disbelief, so she brushes off the thought. Suddenly, Duke calls, sharing how brave he felt confessing his feelings to Nicola, only for her to dismiss him without a word. Exhausted from the emotional roller coaster and her hard work throughout the day, Nicola does not respond and drifts off to sleep while Duke remains on the line, feeling rejected again. The next morning, everyone gathers for breakfast at Cherry Blossom, surprised to see Madam Cole treating Mr. Dan so well. They can't understand the reason behind her kindness, but feel a sense of joy. Meanwhile, it turns out that Madam Cole has realized Mr. Dan never left her. It was all the president scheming. Meanwhile, Martha wakes up in a hotel room next to Ken. She starts yelling at him, accusing him of taking advantage of her. She slaps him and leaves the hotel. But the truth was, after Martha was so drunk that she couldn't even open her eyes, Ken struggled to figure out where to drop her off, ultimately bringing her to the hotel instead. When Ken finally gets to his place, JoJo berates him for coming home so late, scolding him for wasting his life chasing after an old rich lady. After breakfast, Nicola heads to work, shocked to find Duke there so early in the morning. Duke asks Nicola that now she's ignoring her, but she responds that yesterday she was very tired, so she slept and now she has to work. Duke is now thinking that first he needs to solve the painting case, only after that Nicola will agree to talk to her. Duke heads to his office and immediately asks his secretary for the phone number of the lady who had bought Mr. Jackson's painting. Meanwhile, when Mrs. Smith finds private loan papers in Mr. Smith's clothes, she breaks down in tears and urgently informs the entire household, begging them to save her husband. She fears that if they don't intervene, her husband will once again get trapped in the vicious cycle of private loans. Mr. Dan, Ken, and Max, armed and ready, rush out to rescue Mr. Smith, just as Mr. Smith is about to sign the loan papers, which ominously state that if he fails to repay on time, his organs will be harvested. The trio arrives, takes down the thugs, and whisks Mr. Smith away to safety. On another front, when Duke finally gets through to the lady on the phone, he discovers that it was his mother who had told the lady the painting would arrive a few days late. And guess what? On that very day, his mother had been planning to personally deliver Mr. Jackson's painting to the lady's house. A light bulb goes off in Duke's head when he sees the painting in his mother's hands. He suddenly realizes how she orchestrated everything to get Nicola kicked out of the company. Despite his mother's denials, Duke is not buying a word of it. He grabs the painting and storms off. Duke then heads over to Nicola, proudly telling her that he had recovered Mr. Jackson's painting. Nicola is thrilled, and she eagerly agrees to go with Duke. After all, Duke wants to clear Nicola of all accusations. Mr. Smith, on the other hand, is brought to a guest house where Mrs. Smith furiously scolds him. Despite Mrs. Smith's repeated warnings, Mr. Smith had gone ahead and taken a private loan, pushing Mrs. Smith to the point where she demanded a divorce. Meanwhile, President Jones is getting an earful from Kathy, who suggests he should break up with his girlfriend because she's too low class. But President Jones, clearly not interested, brushes her off and starts discussing business with his secretary. She informs him that Andy is arriving from America to finalize the North Sky project. President Jones assumes that Duke has gone to pick Andy up from the airport. But Duke, totally distracted by his mission with Nicola, has completely forgotten about the pickup. Seizing the moment, Duke confesses his feelings to Nicola while they are in the car, probably figuring that she has no escape in a moving vehicle. But Nicola pretends to fall asleep, leaving Duke to chuckle at her adorable antics. When they finally deliver the painting to the lady, Nicola also realizes that it was Martha who had stolen the painting in the first place. After they leave, the lady calls Martha to gossip, mentioning how lovely Duke's secretary Nicola is. This news floors Martha. She was shocked to find out that Duke had taken Nicola along with him. At the same time, President Jones steps out of Cherry Blossom and urgently calls JoJo, telling her to pack her things and come out quickly. JoJo is totally flustered and sneaks out, asking the president how she could possibly leave Cherry Blossom so suddenly. President Jones replies that he can't stand the thought of his beauty staying at the enemy's house. Just then, Mr. Dan and Madam Cole show up, and JoJo hides in the president's car trunk. When they finally come face to face, Madam Cole accuses President Jones of stealing her love and running off with a huge chunk of her father's money. President Jones arrogantly responds that he can repay the money now, and what he did with Madam Cole was just child's play. Furious, Madam Cole retorts that he built his empire with the stolen money and that he will never be truly happy. With that, she storms off. Meanwhile, a suffocated Jojo finally crawls out of the trunk and confronts President Jones, asking if he really did steal the money. President Jones snaps back, claiming he did not steal anything. He just took the money without telling them, and he admits he deeply despises both of them. On the way back, Nicola thanks Duke for his help, calling him very kind. But Duke cuts her off, saying he doesn't help people just for the sake of it. He is doing all this because he likes her. Nicola quickly makes him stop the car and steps out. She confronts Duke, asking why he is wasting his life chasing after a widow like her. She accuses him of wanting to marry her out of pity. Is this just an infatuation, or does Duke actually have a reason for loving her? Duke, clearly hurt, admits he has no idea why he loves her, but he vows to prove that it's not just attraction or sympathy for her child. He then tells Nicola that he won't force her anymore and starts to leave, as he needs to pick someone up from the airport. But despite his haste, they end up stuck in traffic, and Duke calls President Jones to inform him that he won't be able to make it to the airport. President Jones is furious. Sensing an opportunity, Kathy tells President Jones that Kendall is fluent in English and can pick up Andy. President Jones agrees, but this doesn't sit well with Martha, who keeps trying to call Duke, though he ignores her calls. Martha blames Nicola for this mess, thinking that if Duke had not gone to help her, neither Kendall nor Kathy would have had the chance to meet Andy. Martha begins to wonder if the same fate awaits her as when she had given a bag full of money and gold to Nicola's husband Jeremy. But now, unaware from anyone that the bag, here comes the shocking twist, is safely locked away in Mr. Dan's locker. Kendall goes to pick up a VIP for their deal, and as per her mother's suggestion, showers them with exaggerated praise. Her flattery does the trick, and the VIP guests are thoroughly impressed with Kendall's hospitality. Meanwhile, back at the guest house, everyone pitches in to help Mr. Smith by collecting money. However, they only manage to gather $10,000, so Mr. Dan generously offers to cover the remaining money. With this money, Mr. Smith can finally buy his bakery, bringing joy to both him and his wife. When Duke returns home, Martha gives him an earful, blaming him for getting distracted by Nicola. She argues that if Duke had not been so caught up with Nicola, Kendall would not have had to go pick up the VIP guests, and Duke wouldn't have missed such a big opportunity. But Duke, unfazed, simply ignores her scolding. A grand ceremony is held to finalize the North Sky Hotel deal, where Andy praised Kendall profusely. Kathy is overjoyed to hear this, but Martha remains silently displeased. The deal is signed successfully, and after the ceremony, Duke approaches President Jones to discuss bringing Nicola back to the company. After all, Duke found the missing Jackson painting, but the room is shocked at how much Duke seems to care for Nicola. President Jones flatly refuses, saying Nicola is not a good fit for their company, and Duke quietly accepts the decision. Martha, convinced that the widow Nicola is manipulating Duke, confronts Nicola directly and even slaps her, warning her to stay away from Duke. Martha accuses Nicola of trying to use Duke to uncover the truth about her husband's death. Nicola, unflustered, shoots back that it is Duke who is pursuing her, not the other way around, and suggests that there might be some truth to Martha's accusations, and there is something about her husband's death that she is hiding from her. Martha, suddenly feeling cornered, leaves in silence, as if caught in her own scheme. After being denied by President Jones, Duke arranges for Nicola to work at a friend's company, which his friend agrees to. Meanwhile, Mr. Dan tries to open a briefcase that Jeremy had been carrying, given to him by Martha, but it refuses to budge. President Jones then calls JoJo, urging her to leave Cherry Blossom as soon as possible. After the call, he mutters curses about his enemies, but before long, Martha arrives. President Jones informs her that he plans to publicly announce Duke as his heir the next day, which fills Martha with glee. As she leaves the company, she spots Ken and tries to strike up a conversation, but Ken has been ignoring her ever since their last encounter in the hotel room. Nicola later meets with Kathy and reveals that Martha had slapped her. Kathy is shocked, and is even more surprised when she learns that it was Duke, not the police, who found the Jackson painting. Nicola then tells Kathy that she had contacted a company in Singapore for further investigations, which revealed that an invitation had been sent not only to her husband, but also to Martha and someone named Leo. Impressed by Nicola's detective skills, Kathy praises her and says it is now her turn to play detective. Meanwhile, Duke visits the car wash owner, sweet-talks him, and even buys a year-long subscription for car washes. When the owner comments on how nice Nicola's boyfriend is, Duke is on cloud nine and asks the owner to continue treating Nicola well whenever she visits. Back at home, Mr. Dan manages to get the briefcase unlocked by a professional. When they finally open it, they are stunned to find it full of cash and gold. It turns out that Mr. Dan's briefcase must have somehow been switched with Jeremy's. On the other side, JoJo packs up her belongings, heartbroken about leaving Cherry Blossom. She spends one last night with Madam Cole, apologizing but not revealing that she plans to leave Cherry Blossom. Duke, determined to investigate Nicola's husband's death himself, questions one of Martha's employees about Jeremy and learns that Jeremy only followed Madam Martha's orders, which in turn were influenced by Mr. Leo. Jeremy, it seems, managed all the accounts for Martha's art gallery. This revelation shocks Duke as he begins to realize the full extent of his mother's wrongdoings and how well she knew Jeremy. Meanwhile, Kathy tells her daughter Kendall that Duke is fixated on Nicola, which Kendall finds hard to believe. Kathy compares Duke's obsession with Nicola to Kendall's own pursuit of the poor Max, making the point that Duke is just as relentless. At the opening ceremony of Mr. Smith's bakery, he reveals that he has named it Cherry Blossom Bakery, which delights everyone, and they celebrate together. Amid all this, Nicola issues a direct challenge to Martha, vowing to uncover the truth about her husband's death. Martha is left rattled by this declaration. Later, Duke approaches Nicola and tells her that he has arranged a good job for her at his friend's company. But Nicola firmly explains that because her husband's death was due to Duke's mother, she wants nothing to do with him and tells him to leave. Duke, deeply hurt by her words, leaves, and once he is gone, Nicola feels bad for having spoken to him so harshly. When Kendall told Max about Duke that he loves Nicola, Wu also left speechless as he didn't believe her. But when Kendall mentions that Duke genuinely loves Nicola as he is not a playboy, because she has known him since childhood, Max becomes happy for Nicola and her baby. Meanwhile, before JoJo left Cherry Blossom, she came to meet Ken one last time, but instead she stumbles upon a cat fight with Kathy, who are going at it like actual cats. Ken tries to separate them, but it's like trying to part water with your bare hands. Amidst this chaos, President Jones arrives to pick up JoJo. He calls her, but when she does not answer, he walks right into the house. As soon as Madam Cole and Mr. Dan find out that President Jones's girlfriend is none other than JoJo, they almost faint. Just then, Ken rescues JoJo from the chaos and whisks her in the house. Back home, once everyone confirms the news, Madam Cole nearly passes out, and the whole house erupts into an argument. But Ken, being the hero of the day, manages to save the day. After things settle down, everyone finally sits to talk. In the end, JoJo agrees to leave with President Jones, but she keeps apologizing to Madam Cole over and over again. Outside, Ken, Mr. Smith, and Mrs. Smith try to block her path, but Madam Cole eventually lets JoJo go, telling everyone that the girl has made up her mind. Meanwhile, Max tries to convince Nicola to get into a relationship with Duke, but Nicola flatly refuses, saying that they are not a match and that she will ruin Duke's life. Despite Max's best efforts, Nicola does not budge. On the other hand, President Jones brings JoJo to his home, but his two daughters-in-law start protesting. President Jones shuts them down by saying that if anyone has a problem, they can leave. But as soon as JoJo enters her room, Martha and Kathy beat her up, warning her that if she spills anything to President Jones, she will be getting daily beatings. When President Jones visits her room, the two hide, but he makes it clear that if any of his daughters-in-law bully JoJo, he won't spare them. Still, JoJo keeps quiet out of fear. Meanwhile, Kendall teases Duke, saying that he likes Nicola, but when he finds out that Martha slapped Nicola, he rushes to Cherry Blossom and apologizes to Nicola. Nicola forgives him, saying his mother is right, and that a low-status widow like her isn't fit to be anyone's daughter-in-law. Hearing this, Duke feels terrible. Later, when Nicola finds out that JoJo has left the house, everyone is really worried, especially since Madam Cole has been utterly depressed since her departure. On the other hand, JoJo has been crying her eyes out, and when she tries to leave her room, Kathy is standing guard outside to make sure JoJo doesn't go to her father-in-law's room. The next morning, when President Jones finds Kathy sleeping outside JoJo's room, he sends her away and gives JoJo a black card, which makes JoJo so happy that she showers him with kisses, almost giving him a heart attack. Meanwhile, Mr. Dan is still confused about when his briefcase got swapped. Later, in front of Kendall and Duke, President Jones announces that he will transfer all his property to Duke. Kendall storms off to tell Max and breaks down in tears. The owner of the car wash sees Duke's picture in the newspaper and praises Nicola's boyfriend in front of her, but Nicola stays silent. However, after the owner leaves, Nicola is secretly happy about Duke's success. When Ken sees JoJo at his workplace, he sarcastically remarks that she must be really happy being rich, but JoJo stays silent. Just then, Ken gets a call from a drunk Martha. When Ken arrives, Martha tells him that soon Duke will become the owner of the J-Star Hotel, and that until then, they should secretly date. Hearing this, Ken's dreams of gold suddenly come alive, but the moment someone snaps their picture and sends it to Kathy, she is now thrilled as she has a weapon to blackmail Martha, and also the president. Later, when Duke arrives at the car wash, he tells Nicola that he is only there to get his car washed, not to see her. Nicola can't even respond to that. Meanwhile, Mr. Dan drops by Mr. Smith's bakery and leaves Nicola's baby there, as he has some important work to do. Both Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith are happy to babysit. When Mrs. Smith goes to make a delivery, she takes Nicola's baby along. On her way back, she gets busy filling out a lottery ticket form and returns to the bakery. When Mr. Smith realizes that Nicola's baby is missing, he scolds his wife for forgetting where they left him. On the other side, Duke is not letting Nicola clean the car, and suddenly Mr. Smith calls Nicola to inform her of the situation. Hearing this, Nicola is shocked, and she and Duke rush off to find Nicola's baby. As Nicola is on the verge of tears, Duke assures her that they will find Nicola's baby. When they reach the bakery, Nicola almost passes out upon realizing Nicola's baby is missing. But then, Duke notices a lottery ticket on Yang's coat, and they head to the shop where she bought it. However, on the way, Duke gets badly injured while saving Nicola from an oncoming car. But finally, they find Nicola's baby safe and sound at the shop. Nicola starts liking Duke even more, realizing that he truly cares for her. Then comes a shocking revelation. The owner of North Sky Hotel is none other than Mr. Dan, and no one knew. Andy was there to seal the deal with J-Star Hotel on Mr. Dan's behalf. Nicola takes Duke to the doctor, and afterward, to celebrate finding Nicola's baby, Nicola treats Duke to a meal, and Duke enjoys every moment of it. Sensing an opportunity, Nicola tells Duke that he should find someone who matches his standards because she is not worthy of him. She tells him that he is well educated and encourages him to chase his dreams, adding that she will always be cheering for him. Duke repeatedly tells Nicola to keep quiet in a cute way, but when she mentions his studies, he gets a bit uncomfortable. When JoJo goes to meet Madame Cole chases her away, telling her she is no longer her daughter. As soon as Madame Cole returns home, she stumbles upon a bag full of money next to Mr. Dan's stuff. She is completely shocked and immediately suspects that Nicholas robbed a bank or something. Without a second thought, she hides the money to keep it safe. Meanwhile, Mr. Dan is frantically searching for his suitcase but comes up empty-handed and starts to panic. On the other side of town, Martha and Ken, who have recently started dating, are getting to know each other better. Ken comes clean and confesses that he is not rolling in dough and is currently staying at a guest house. Martha, in her cool as a cucumber style, says she doesn't mind because she's got more than enough money for the both of them. Martha then takes Jay to her father's memorial and boldly proposes to him. Jay is over the moon and the two of them are on cloud 9. Meanwhile, when JoJo arrives home, Doji throws all of her belongings out along with a heap of cash. On the way back from dinner, Duke promises Nicola that he will help her solve the mystery surrounding Jeremy's death, which makes her incredibly happy. Just then, Duke receives a call from a reporter asking about his degree. Without missing a beat, he hangs up the call. Nicola, sensing something is off, asks him about it, but Duke brushes it off. Still, Nicola reassures him, saying she will always stand by him, even if he did something wrong because she knows there must have been a reason. Duke, touched by her loyalty, feels a little better. When President Jones arrives home, he sees JoJo standing outside in the cold with all her stuff. Sensing what happened, he storms inside and warns Kathy that this is the last straw, and if any of his daughters-in-law ever mistreat his future wife again, he will kick them out of the house. He then drops a bombshell in front of Kathy that tomorrow, he is going to officially announce Duke as his heir. Kathy is left reeling from the shock. Meanwhile, President Jones's other daughter-in-law, Martha, is enjoying a date with Ken, and the two finally admit their feelings for each other. Duke, however, is a nervous wreck, terrified that the truth about his degree will come out tomorrow, and everyone will judge him harshly. When Kendall gets home and hears about Duke's impending takeover, she just rolls over and goes to sleep, too heartbroken to care anymore. Then, Doji receives a message revealing that Duke's MBA degree from abroad is fake. She was so overjoyed that she could dance. In the meantime, JoJo is getting an update on the situation at home from Ken, who suddenly realizes that JoJo has been using him all along. He hangs up on her and goes to have dinner instead. At dinner, Mr. Dan is grilling everyone about the missing briefcase, but no one admits to knowing anything. After dinner, Max adds a nameplate to Nicola's baby stroller, which makes Nicola incredibly happy, and she thanks Max. But Duke is still worried, knowing his fake degree will be exposed soon. When President Jones sees the evidence of Duke's fake degree, he realizes that someone is trying to tarnish his J-Star Hotel's reputation. But before he can react, Duke steps up and confesses that his degree is indeed fake, leaving everyone stunned. Duke pleads for a chance to explain himself, but President Jones is furious and accuses Duke of ruining his reputation. The stress causes President Jones to collapse with a headache, and he passes out. When Kendall hears about this, she is equally shocked. The news spreads to Max, and then to Nicola, who becomes very worried about Duke. Duke, now at a bar, is drowning in his misery because no one is willing to believe his side of the story. The doctor advises that President Jones needs plenty of rest, but as soon as he leaves, the two daughters-in-law start a catfight. Duke's mother is convinced that Kathy was the one who leaked the news about the fake degree to the media. When JoJo tries to intervene, she ends up getting caught in the middle of the brawl. In the Cherry Blossom, Mr. Dan confronts Madam Cole about the briefcase, and she explains that she hid it because she thought it was stolen money. But when she realizes it belongs to someone else, she and Mr. Dan rushes outside just as Mr. Smith and his wife start a fire to cook. Mr. Dan quickly tells them to put out the fire, and when they do, the briefcase is retrieved. But because of the heat, the briefcase opens, and everyone is shocked to see the enormous stash of money inside. Mr. Dan and Madam Cole explain everything, and everyone decides to put the money back in the bag and return it to Mr. Dan. However, Max finds Jeremy's fake passport that had fallen out of the briefcase, and the ground seems to shift beneath his feet as he realizes that Jeremy risked his life for that briefcase. Later, when Nicola returns home from work, she finds Duke waiting for her. He apologizes, thinking she must be disappointed like everyone else. But Nicola reassures him that she trusts him completely and believes he had a good reason for what he did. Duke, moved to tears, hugs Nicola and finally tells her the whole truth that one time he and his best friend were at a restaurant when a shooting broke out. His friend died trying to save him, and the trauma sent Duke into a deep depression, causing him to fail his studies. But because his family had such high expectations of him, he faked his degree to avoid disappointing them. Now, no one believes him. Nicola assures Duke that no matter what, she and her baby will always stand by him, and he will never have to face anything alone. Duke, feeling a little happier, thanks her, and since he's had a drink, Nicola books a cab for him. But back at Cherry Blossom, there is still tension in the air because they don't know what to do with all the money. Ken suggests they split it among themselves, but Mr. Dan and Madam Cole refuse. Max, alone in his room, is conflicted about whether or not he should tell Nicola the truth about Jeremy. While waiting for the cab, Duke asks Nicola to hold his hand. After a bit of hesitation, she holds it tightly, which makes Duke feel much better. When the cab arrives, Duke heads home, feeling a little more hopeful. When Nicola drops Duke and returns home, she is completely shocked to hear the story about the money. After reaching home, when Duke enters the president's room, the president embarrasses him and kicks him out. To make matters worse, he also insults Duke's mother. JoJo had been taking good care of the president, but she felt bad for Duke. After all this, neither Duke nor his mother is very happy because this was their last chance to secure the president's entire property in their name. The president rarely gives anyone an opportunity, but Kendall and her mother are over the moon to know that the only option for the whole property is now only Kendall. Duke had already forgiven his mother, so he shares the whole story with his friend, which makes his mom feel bad, and she is prompting JoJo to tell Duke's truth so he can speak to the president. Then Duke's mom reveals everything to JoJo. She speaks to the president by telling him that Duke is a good person and tells him the whole story. She questions how he could manage a 5-star hotel so well if he was genuinely weak in studies. Duke's situation just was not good, and due to immense pressure, he had lied about everything. The president listens to her and seems to be considering forgiving Duke. When she tells Martha the news, she sincerely thanks her and promises never to trouble her again. Just then, Kathy asks JoJo to step aside so she can speak to the president, but when she refuses, Kathy tries to attack JoJo, but O steps in. Thankfully, she saves her from that situation. Nicola is very worried about Duke, so she calls him, which makes Duke extremely happy. He starts teasing her again, but Nicola responds that he should not be daydreaming all the time. Duke finds Nicola's cuteness irresistible. After thinking it over all night, Max gathers everyone at the breakfast table to reveal that the briefcase belonged to Jeremy. On the day the warehouse caught fire, he had gone there just to meet Kendall. However, Jeremy also shows up, and Max thinks that Kendall's mother sent him, leading to a fight between them. In the scuffle, the fire breaks out. They both try to extinguish it, but the fire only intensifies. Due to the fire, Kendall's condition worsens, so Duke takes her outside and tells Jeremy to come too. But Jeremy, in an attempt to save the suitcase, does not make it out and ends up dying. Everyone present is left in shock upon hearing this news. Nicola is completely shattered to learn that despite knowing all this, Max kept her in the dark and broke her heart time and again. Max apologizes profusely, but Nicola calls him a terrible person and ends all their relationships. Meanwhile, the Cherry Blossom group slowly reveals their stories, mentioning that they were all near the warehouse that night for various reasons, which is how they ended up staying at Cherry Blossom due to the fire. Mr. Smith mentions that their car was parked outside the warehouse, and the dash cam likely recorded who ran away with Jeremy's briefcase. They start checking the SD card, and eventually, they find it. At the same time, Kendall and her mother start annoying Duke and his mom again. But just then, during dinner, the president announces that because of the explanation from JoJo, he is giving Duke a second chance, which makes Duke's mother extremely happy. The president adds that Duke will need to go abroad to pursue an MBA degree, but Duke is not thrilled about that because he does not want to leave Nicola. However, his mother senses this and emotionally blackmails him to go study abroad. Martha then goes on another date with Ken, and their photo was captured by the person hired by Kathy. Meanwhile, Kendall is completely preoccupied with her own concerns. After much thought, Mr. Dan remembers that when he went to see the fire, he bumped into someone outside the warehouse, which led to their briefcase getting exchanged. When they find the memory card in Cherry Blossom, everyone starts watching the footage. In that footage, they see the fire and realize it was at that very moment that Nicola's husband lost his life, shattering her completely, while Max is unable to bear the truth either. Suddenly, a man emerges from the warehouse, and Mr. Dan recognizes him as the person he had bumped into earlier, while Nicola also identifies him as the warehouse captain. Nicola plans to go to the island to meet him, especially since the captain had previously concealed everything from her. Encouraged by Ken, Max also agrees to go with Nicola, and soon after, JoJo arrives in her car, ready to take everyone there, and they all set off together. Meanwhile, Kathy complains to the president about giving Duke a second chance when her daughter is much more capable. The president ignores her comments. Duke's mother overhears this and scolds Kathy for criticizing her son in front of the president. Kathy retorts, but once Martha leaves, she mutters to herself that Duke's luck is only temporary, because the day the president learns the truth about her mother's affairs, everything will come crashing down. Mr. Smith reflects on how strange things were that day, noting that the fire department had arrived before he even called them, as if they already knew there would be a fire, but he quickly dismisses it. Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith decide not to join the group because Yang's memory is starting to fade. On the way, Ken asks Mr. Dan what was actually in their briefcase. Mr. Dan thinks that it contained all the important accounting documents for J-Star Hotel, which could easily lead to its ruin. However, he claims there was nothing special in the briefcase. Upon reaching the island, they learn that the captain has taken the boat somewhere and won't return until nightfall, so they all sit down for dinner at the restaurant while waiting for him. Over there, Duke visits Nicola's house to share everything with him, but only Madame Cole is present. He tells Madame Cole that he is the grandson of President Jones and that he is in love with Nicola, which surprises Madame Cole. She asks if his family knows about this, to which Duke replies as no. He helps Madame Cole fix her bulb, and just as she goes to get milk to quiet him, she sees Duke affectionately treating Yolmu as if he were his own baby. This sight makes Madame Cole happy as well. Meanwhile, on the island, Nicola observes that Max is still feeling guilty about Jeremy's death. She begins to recall how Max has always been there to help her, leading her to forgive him. Hearing this, Max feels somewhat relaxed but promises Nicola that he will surely atone for his mistakes. In the meantime, JoJo expresses her feelings to Ken, noting that there is nothing lacking at President Jones's house, yet she doesn't find the happiness there that she had in Cherry Blossom. Just then, Ken sees Mr. Dan coming out of the washroom with his briefcase, which raises his suspicions, as Mr. Dan didn't even trust him a little. Max informs everyone that the captain has arrived, but Mr. Dan insists that if everyone goes together, the captain will become suspicious. So only he goes to inform the captain that his briefcase had been switched outside the warehouse. The captain then goes to get Mr. Dan's briefcase from his house, but picks up a stick and hits him, suspecting that there is definitely some conspiracy behind it. He grabs the briefcase and tries to escape, but everyone attempts to catch him. Eventually, Nicola knocks him down with a punch, impressing everyone with her attack. When they manage to capture the captain and start to extract the truth from him by showing him the video footage, the captain reveals that on that day, Jeremy and another man were supposed to leave for China by boat. He had arranged for their departure at night and told Jeremy to rest in the warehouse. However, at first glance, he realized that the briefcase must contain something valuable. That night, after arranging for the boat when he heads towards the warehouse, a fire breaks out. He tries to save Jeremy, but by then it is too late, and he can only escape with the briefcase. At this point, Nicola shows the captain a photo of Mr. Leo, and he recognizes him as the other man who had come with Jeremy. Mr. Dan tells Nicola to call Leo, and when she does, the captain informs Leo that his briefcase is with them and suggests meeting him. However, the captain also mentions that Jeremy did not want to go to China. He only wanted to be with his wife and child. Hearing this, Nicola breaks down once again. Everyone prepares to return, but Max is missing, making Nicola anxious about something bad happening. She tells everyone to search for Max. On the other hand, Max goes to the police station and tells them that Jeremy did not commit suicide, but due to a lack of solid evidence, the police do not believe him. Nicola arrives and takes Max out of the police station, telling him to stop blaming himself as he is not at fault in any way. Meanwhile, when Duke comes home late, his mother asks him why he took so long and whether he didn't need to prepare to leave. Duke responds that he needs some time to think. Martha had already figured out that her son was completely smitten by that widow, but Duke constantly tried to convince her not to call Nicola a widow. While she was busy scolding him, Mr. Leo called with news that Jeremy's briefcase had been found and that the captain had summoned them to collect it. Martha was over the moon with happiness upon hearing this. Soon, Mr. Dan and everyone else returned to Cherry Blossom with both briefcases in tow. Meanwhile, JoJo arrived at President Jones's house only to be greeted with a stern lecture for arriving so late. President Jones even mentioned that the car showroom people were under the impression that JoJo had taken the car for a test drive and then bolted with it. In response, JoJo suggested buying the car, but President Jones flatly refused, which led to JoJo storming out after giving him a piece of her mind. Kathy, witnessing all this, once again began filling President Jones's ears with gossip, but he shushed her and left. Meanwhile, Kendall was out shopping for a wedding dress with Max, but Max still couldn't believe they were going to get married secretly. Despite the disbelief, they thoroughly enjoyed their wedding shopping date. Back at home, Madam Cole informed Nicola that Duke had visited, and that he was a good guy, but his family was quite peculiar. Nicola couldn't muster a response. The next morning, Ken, Mr. Dan, and everyone else kept a close watch on the captain when Leo came to collect the briefcase. That's when Nicola confronted him, accusing him of being the reason behind Jeremy's death. Leo, in his defense, said that if he had not sent Jeremy to China, the police would have arrested him. But Nicola insisted her late husband was innocent, and they all wrestled the briefcase away from Leo before letting him go. Mr. Dan then reassured everyone that the briefcase was crucial to bringing President Jones to his knees. Nicola then went to work, where Martha was already waiting to talk to her. She literally fell at Nicola's feet, begging her for mercy, explaining that after much effort, President Jones had given Duke another chance, but Duke was refusing to go to America to complete his studies because of Nicola. Nicola, feeling cornered, promised Martha that she would keep Duke at a distance from now on, as she too wanted him to be successful in life. However, once outside, Martha reverted to her true self, thinking about how she had to lower herself in front of a girl like Nicola for her son's well-being. Just then, Martha received a call from Leo, who informed her that Nicola had the briefcase and knew everything, and would soon confront Martha as well. Hearing this, Martha was once again thrown into shock. Meanwhile, Duke met with Nicola and explained how his family was pressuring him to go to the US to study, but that he wouldn't go if she asked him to stay. However, Nicola harshly told Duke that her heart and mind were only filled with Jeremy and that she still loved him. She said Duke had no place in her life, which broke Duke's heart into a million pieces, leaving him deeply emotional. On the other side, Kathy was fully prepared to show President Jones photos of Martha's affair, but JoJo walked into the room, saw the photos, and bolted out of there. Realizing that the photos were missing, Kathy suspected that JoJo had taken them and ran after her. JoJo, meanwhile, rushed to show the photos to Ken, confronting him about what was going on and asking how he could date Martha. Ken was utterly stunned when he saw the photos. Elsewhere, Mr. Dan treated Madam Cole to a meal at a fancy restaurant. Their first date, something they had always wanted, turned out to be incredibly romantic. While planning her wedding, Kendall reassured Max that once they were married, her family would surely accept him, as she no longer had any expectations from President Jones's property and only wanted to start a happy family with Max. Duke, fully packed and ready to leave for the US, but he didn't want to leave Nicola. But after their interaction, he felt there was nothing else he could do. He said his goodbyes and left for the US. Meanwhile, Nicola kept thinking about Duke, crying until she fell asleep in her office. Suddenly, a fire broke out. Nicola panicked, recalling how her husband Jeremy must have tried to escape the flames but couldn't. As these thoughts consumed her, she collapsed onto the burning room's floor. But as soon as Nicola thinks she will die like her husband Jeremy, Duke comes outside her office and rescues her. He just wanted to meet Nicola for the very last time before going to the USA. Clearly, Nicola was so shocked by the fire. At President Jones' house, Kathy shows him the pictures of Ken and Martha together, and also added they are having an affair. Looking at all the pictures, Martha asked for forgiveness. But President Jones just is not buying the fact that his daughter-in-law is having an affair with a low-class employee of his own company.